Good afternoon. Thank you, Jane, for this introduction and for the invitation. I was visiting for a conference in the US, and when Jane found out that I am nearby, she gave me this opportunity to come and speak here. And I was basically at the Clinton Global Initiative University, which took place over the weekend, not far from here. And I see Donna Shalala here from CGI, who I've worked with them for many years before I became Minister of Education. The reason I'm saying that is just to give an example of what kind of work I was doing before and what did I find when this crisis happened in Lebanon. At CGIU, I went once with President Clinton to New Orleans, where we had to deal with the aftermath of the Katrina hurricane. Usually, a hurricane or an earthquake hits for 2-3 days, and then everyone rush and try and work with the situation and see how they can help. When I took over this position in Lebanon 2 years ago, the government, prior to our government, decided to be hands-off. Didn't want to deal with the crisis, didn't want to handle the refugees issue for many reasons, political, religious, and you name it. Lebanon is a country of 4 million people, as you just heard. Out of the 4 million, we have all religions represented, and we have a struggle to try and have political stability. Our financial situation is not very good. We never have balanced budgets. We have debts that we pay every year. The schooling system, the government system is weak. The Lebanese students have difficulty getting quality education. So while I came trying to see how we can help, I was faced with a bigger challenge, which is the refugees crisis. Lebanon has opened its doors for many years. Prior to the Syrian refugees, we had 500,000 Palestinians who are now displaced, and they are living in Lebanon, who left in the 40s and the 50s Palestine and moved over. And until now, they are in a situation that is beyond acceptable to anybody in the world, where they have no rights, and their living situation and condition is horrible. Even as late as this year, UNRWA, who's helping them with education, was about to shut down their schools and say that, we're leaving you on your own. So they are always left, the refugees, to deal with situations where they don't know what tomorrow is hiding for them. So in Lebanon, when I took over this post over 2 years ago, I thought I have to deal with the Lebanese situation as well as trying and help with the crisis, because I was faced with 450,000 school-age children in Lebanon from Syria. Just to give you an example, the schools that I run at the government system, we have 250,000 Lebanese students in the schooling system. 250,000. I'm faced with an additional 450,000 from Syria. So the first thing I thought, I will go on the internet and search and see how did any country handle such situation in the past. You probably know the answer. It does not exist. No one has ever had to deal with such situation. The San Francisco Bay Area, just to give you an example of the size of the crisis that we have, they probably have 7.5 million people living around the Bay Area. The area of the Bay is also double the size of Lebanon. So if you want to take into perspective what happened in Lebanon, think of 4 million people that walked into the San Francisco area and need education, healthcare, and all sort of, they need a house, they need to eat, all sort of help. But the difference is we have a strong economy here, we have a government in place, we have systems that are working. This is something we lack in Lebanon. With all this situation, I still said we cannot leave these children without education. I heard part of Chris's speech, but I was briefed on other things he mentioned earlier when he was talking about the ancient Greek history, and he was talking about the the fact that sometimes taking the refugees into the workforce will help build the economy of any country. And while this is true in some regard, it can be a disaster if you take on these refugees and don't provide them with education. Uneducated generation, if they're left behind, they will be a lost generation. And if they become a lost generation, they will not only affect Lebanon and the region, they will reach Europe, the US, Canada, and everywhere else in the world. When we talk about a lost generation, we are talking about children who will see no hope for their lives and for the future. Parents who lose hope in raising their children. They will be possible recruits for terrorists. This is the least. We will see child labor, child prostitution, early marriages, you name it. So we are not only dealing with putting these children in schools, we have to deal with everything else that comes with it. At the same time, we felt we have to work, despite the opposition that I was receiving in Lebanon before anywhere else, because they felt if I am doing what I'm doing by providing education to all, I am telling the refugees, you can stay in Lebanon. And when I say that this is made available to them and to their families, the opposition in Lebanon politically will start blaming a government official for facilitating the stay of the refugees in a country. While the 500,000 taken in Germany and the 30,000 in Canada and the 3,000 in the US, if I'm not mistaken, is seen that somebody is helping, think about a country of 4 million that had to take 1.5 million and 500,000 Palestinians from before. Think about the unemployment rate that doubled in 1 year. So it is not as easy as one may think. The refugees could be turned into the workforce and they will help the economy. There are no jobs. There are no projects for Lebanese before we say for the refugees. So one have to look at the situation and try and plan an entire solution. It starts with education, ends with opportunities, jobs, and most importantly, commitment by the international community to be there and ready and on time. The biggest challenge is always the funding that comes from the international community to help in such situation. They're always a day late. And when you miss an opportunity like that, when you miss a school year or 2 or 3 from any child's life, it's highly unlikely that these people will go back to school. So we have to be ready, and we have to be ready in time. This year, I can say I was able to take 200,000 Syrian refugees in the system. I still have 250,000 that are still out of school, and the plan is to put them in school by the end of 2016-2017 academic year. We are working with the international community, with most of the donors. However, when the commitments come, when the donors go and make their commitments at conferences, a few months later you'll find out that that commitment has gone down to less than half. That's if it comes. And when it comes, it's late. They give you for each year. Some countries, they cannot operate, and we're talking about big numbers because we are working with governments. They cannot commit more than 1 year in advance. But I cannot plan a system that is going to take on 450,000 child and put them in school without knowing that next year we will be able to keep them in school. And this is a fear. We managed to think outside the box. We managed to say we have 1,200 schools in the government system that we can operate on double shift. So we save some of the money and we can use the same school twice. We have many part-timers, teachers that we are using and giving them extra hours to teach in the afternoon shift. That's easy to say and it's easy to recruit. But what happens after that is you find the complications. Once these students were, entered the schools, they have different standards from the Lebanese students. The Lebanese students learn in English, Arabic, and French. The Syrians only studied in Arabic. So when we mixed them together, the host community was being affected. And then irritation starts. So we had to make sure that we keep the host community host community. So we have to make sure that they are not opposing the stay, because that will ruin the entire plan. For that, we had to work with the social, psychological help of these children. Some of them, most of them, I will say more than 90%, their parents have never been to school or to university. They don't understand the importance of education. We had to convince the parents that your children are better off when they go to school. They'll have a future, they'll have hope. One of the fathers told us, I was visiting with David Cameron when he last went to Lebanon to check on the situation at school, and some parents were there for the meeting, and he said, how can I send my children to school? I need them to work. They have to bring money so we can eat. We don't have food. And the children, 6 and 7 years old, were working in the fields, harvesting potato for $2 a day. This is just sample of the problems. But let me tell you the good side of it. These children, when they go to school, they see the future, they see hope. One of the girls, when I was visiting with Gordon Brown, one of the schools, a 7-year-old girl, we asked her, what do you want to do when you grow up? She said, I want to become an engineer. And I said, why? She said, I want to go back and build Syria when I grow up. This is a 7-year-old girl thinking that way. For that, I will say there's only one solution to deal with this situation. Go back to the source. Stop the war in Syria. Stop the war to stop the bleeding. Because if we don't stop the war, we are going to be receiving, and the rest of the world is going to be receiving more and more refugees. And we have to go look for millions or billions of dollars to deal with that. But what we all know, that the billions were available and ready to arm and pay for the war that's taking place in many places around the world. Think if that money is used for education, rather than spending it on arms, rather than spending this money on wars, and then having to look for tiny bits to try and pay for those people who had to leave their country because of the war. Think if this money is spent on education. It will make a big difference. For those of you who can help and can make a difference, what we need is more lobbying with all the countries, all the governments around the world, to help in education, to help in funding education, and to make decisions at an early stage, not late into the crisis. If we cannot do that, you will always run into a situation where you are a year or two late. Any child that's left out of school for 3 years, as I said, it's highly unlikely that we will make them go back to school. For that reason, we need to talk to the governments more. We need to lobby and tell them political solution is the first thing anyone should be seeking to any crisis around the world, to stop this mass migration and immigration and refugees leaving that country. Once that's dealt with, we will be able to find solutions to those that exist in the countries where they are. Also, in Lebanon, we came up with a plan that allows the parents to work so they don't have to send their children to work on their behalf. We put a plan together, we presented it at the London conference, but that plan requires job opportunities, funding for projects. In the plan that we put for education, for example, we have to build several schools to be able to accommodate the rest. 90% of the people who would work in building such schools are the parents and of the refugees. Because in Lebanon, the workforce mainly is from Syria. So if we have opportunities, if we have funding for such projects, they will be able to work. If we don't, we heard that let them migrate and let them mix with the community, let them help in the economy. That's when you have a healthy economy. But if in the case of Lebanon, if you don't have that, you don't have investments, you are struggling because the Lebanese don't have the jobs, so we cannot create jobs for others. Saying all that, I will probably start ending my comments and say we depend on the good people like yourselves and the work that you can do around the world to think of these children and think of providing them opportunity to see life in a different way, away from war, away from killing, and education may give them hope that they will stay in their country, go back to their country, and not become a burden on another country. One girl around the Ministry of Education in Lebanon about a week ago or 2 weeks ago was sitting on the street, on the side of the street, and as I was passing in the car going to the ministry, I saw two girls, one 11 years old and one was 7 years old, and obviously they were there begging for money. You can tell, and you find many of that now in Lebanon and other countries. So I stopped the car and I went down and I looked at them, because what caught my attention is one of them had a book in her hand. The book had a page that was torn. I looked at her and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm teaching my sister the alphabet." Her sister is 7 years old, does not know the alphabet yet. I said, "Why you're teaching her here on the street? Why can't I take you to schools? Because we're providing schools to all the refugees." She said, "My father wants us to be here because he wants us to help raising money so we can pay for the house rent, because they were in the city and not in camps." Then we found the father, we spoke to UNHCR, and we said we will be able to find housing for the children, but you have to promise us that you will not put them back on the street. We will take them to school. So we had to negotiate with the father that after providing them this opportunity, he won't put them back on the street. And he said, "Well, what about after school? Can I bring them back here?" Because that's the only source of income. Their mother died in the war, so they were there with just the father. The reason I'm saying that is to tell you sometimes the parents need to be educated, not just the children. All sorts of challenges we face when we want to put them in schools. All sorts of challenges. Convincing the parents, one of them, the social and psychological help that they may need, the different backgrounds although Lebanon is not far from Syria, so you can imagine if these people are to reach Europe or the US or any other country, there will be a lot of differences. And we will have to deal with those differences. It's not simple, it's not easy, but we are determined to do it because we believe every child should get an opportunity to get quality education. I think we all believe that, but we need to translate it and translate it fast. If we miss this opportunity, if we don't act fast enough, we will see an entire lost generation. People say it is very expensive always raising money to try and help and try and provide education to people around the world. As the president of Harvard University once said, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Thank you very much.